Happy Canada Day to Canada and to our friends down south. Just letting you know, it's Canada's birthday today. And we're going to focus on something very niche. And we're going to ask the question, or we're going to pose the thought that the market is asking the wrong question when we're specifically talking about helium. Now, if you followed me or have followed me for years, you know I love niche markets, especially ones that are critical, that people don't know enough about. And that's why a lot of the times you can say the market isn't always right because it hasn't priced in a lot of information, and a lot of people are just not aware, and they're not paying attention. And that's often where you can make some of your best discoveries whenever you're dealing in, especially a situation like we are today with logistics, with the fact that we're building so much more in the West, and that we need critical gases and metals and everything else. So let's talk about not just about helium at first. Let's talk about markets first. So why do markets ignore something for years and then suddenly decide it's one of the most important assets in the world? We see this like a mini rotation within a rotation, whether it's uranium goes through a cycle. We know we need uranium. We see all of these data centers and billionaires, they all have a nuclear play. We've seen it with rare earths. I remember presenting in New York 6 or 7 years ago and being quoted in Reuters and talking about rare earths, and people were stunned and amazed at the situation with rare earths. Didn't happen then, though. You had to wait many, many years for that story to accumulate, which is a vital lesson as well, because sometimes, for myself included, when you're in a niche market like mining and looking at critical metals, and you spend all day studying and analyzing, you take it for granted that everyone else must know that we don't have the building blocks to make half the stuff that people want to make. But we're a tiny market, and most people aren't aware of it. So sometimes people get into a metal or get into a market, especially mining, and they exit because, hey, I'm too early. This is a long game. It's a very patient game. And rare earths turned out to be fantastic for that, or antimony. We saw that recently with antimony. You can feel almost like you're wrong sometimes because you say, isn't this obvious? Fundamentally, we need this to make chips, say antimony, or we need rare earths for missile guidance systems, for satellites, you name it, magnets for anything electric, especially electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles. Why does no one notice? It just takes time. The lag is long, and the algorithm is geared towards clickbait, excitement, what's new. Listen, SpaceX, this, future, this, nuclear fusion, dreamland stuff, mining, underwater in volcanoes and on asteroids. I mean, that's going to get you a lot of headlines. It's going to get you a lot of coverage, but we haven't even dealt with the simple issue of, do we have enough silver for solar panels? But you know my view on all that. But it's interesting that then all of a sudden, a commodity becomes extremely strategic, and the market simply realized what it was. And that distinction matters, because investors often think they're discovering a new trend when in reality they're just arriving late to a structural one. And that was the case with antimony, with uranium. It just takes a run. And what happens then as well is, if you're late to that party, you're buying at the top. And even if you're the biggest believer in, say, antimony or uranium, and you got in early to some of these stories, and your stock went up 500% or something incredible, you're going to take your win. You'd be foolish not to. So there's a natural inclination that if you've been sitting in this thing for a while, you've watched it go, time to exit. It could just be arriving at someone's front door saying, wow, oh my God, we do need this. So this is the tricky thing. I mean, timing matters. And often we'll find we're very early to the party. And that's tough. It is tough. But that's how we have to stay diligent and execute with a mindset and with a model that we can trust and rely on. If it's just willy-nilly and we're just trying to follow headlines, everyone loses every time. I mean, you might catch a trend, but if you take a step back and consider that if you're just going off of headlines, you're competing against an algorithm, and they're very good. I think we can all admit that the algorithmic trading, the flow trading, catching trend lines and whatnot, AI and systems today, as soon as an article is out, it's immediately made a trade. There's no way we could consume, even if we had inside information and wanted to do something with it. You're not beating an algorithm that's already read it, consumed it, analyzed it, and made a trade before you. So that's not a very good strategy for people. It just simply isn't. The best strategy is to identify commodities and things that are critical for everything that's strategic. And over the past week, I've been asking myself, are we seeing this happen again? And I believe we are. Now, is the timing the best? No, it's challenging. We have a war in Iran. The markets are taking a bit of a beating. People are questioning the overall AI trade because, yes, there are concerns there, but also that'll be another story. I'm much more of a bull on that side of things than a lot of other people, in part because I use it every day for hours a day. But once again, why does that matter? Well, helium's involved. So let's take a look then and say, is this happening like antimony or some of these other cyclical plays within a cycle? But for anyone thinks this is going to be just about party balloons as well, because usually when people think of helium, they're imagining when they're a kid and they started inhaling helium at a party and they've got the funny voice. Well, that is that, but stay with me. It's much, much more, because that isn't just the helium story. The helium story really is, think of it as an infrastructure story, because it is a semiconductor story. It is an AI story or Internet of Things. It's certainly a national security story. And ultimately, it's a story about how markets misunderstand systems. And we've talked about systems and blueprints and whatnot. What other chain of custody of a metal that you require? People just simply misunderstanding the stockpile, or do we have access, or the logistics of where it comes from? And right now, as we see, the biggest, hottest topics out there, and once again, these are all relevant to helium, are SpaceX. Number one, it's all attention-grabbing headlines. NVIDIA for the longest time. Taiwanese semiconductor, ASML, the largest of the chip makers. You follow on all the other ones that are Micron, that are doing fantastic, and other ones that are making chips as well. Palantir, something we've talked about for years. Of course, data generation, power generation, data center, copper, utilities. These are, everyone is trying to identify the obvious beneficiaries of those types of trades. But what I don't hear very often is what has to exist before any of that can happen. So before AI, like, how do we advance semiconductors? And then before semiconductors, how do we advance or make that fabrication plant? And before that fabrication plant, what's the industrial ecosystem that nobody talks about? Yeah, it's boring. Like, we've started not talking about robots and autonomous things and fun in the future. We're talking about the reality and the engineering and the difficulties about this entire quiet, extremely large and complex ecosystem. And that's where helium floats around. And certainly not because it's glamorous, but because it is necessary. And this is where a little bit of effort and a little bit of work and reaching out to us as well helps, because helium is used throughout semiconductor manufacturing, MRI systems, a lot of scientific research, of course, aerospace. So whether it's Lockheed Martin and Ural, you name it. And I think everyone can notice the defense spending that's going on. To think of the amount of missiles being used, the amount of military use being used between Ukraine and Iran, the U.S. stockpile has to grow. You see that they're applying, whether it's with Project Maven and their entire AI and data strategy, the amount of money being deployed into autonomous vehicles like Andural, which on our site we cover Andural. It's very separate compared to what we usually talk about. We love it. They're probably going to do an IPO later in the year or next year. These all tie together because they're strategic, they're critical, they're necessary. And once again, we always like to see not just the end result of what makes a drone go. That's interesting. But we need to know, do we have everything to make them? Or are we at the beck and call of China or somewhere else? Can we process them? Can we do any of that? And that becomes a far more interesting and nuanced question. And that's where few people spend a lot of their time, but that's where we need to be focusing, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned. Are you going to get the fast, quick trades that you're going to see, or the high volatility, or the massive volume in a SpaceX? No, of course not. It's a lot more work. There's a lot more to understand. But to us, we consider it to be far less risk than compiling all the components, understanding the engineering, trying to understand Falcon X or any of the other incredible drones and or missile guidance systems to understand, should I be investing in this? This is a lot easier. And once again, Helium isn't easy, but it certainly is a lot easier than trying to understand advanced engineering on top of financial modeling, on top of huge mammoth companies attempting to become everything, to be vertically integrated. So because of the principles we follow, we try to follow something very, very simple here at the market mindset. And it's don't inherit the narrative. Don't chase after the headline, because it's likely too late. You might catch part of the trade or the trend, but we want to challenge it. We want to get ahead of it. So we ask, what has to be true for this headline or for an explanation or for whatever it is to be correct? Say, did the Iran war create a helium problem, or did it expose one that already existed? Because when I started digging into the history of the market, we've covered helium for quite some time. You'll remember some of the first helium reports we put out, good heavens, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And that first helium shortage, or the Helium 1.0, I would say even back 2011, there's a Helium 2.0 issue, a Helium 3, Helium 4, and now we've put out a report free for everyone. Go check it out on our Substack, Helium 5.0. It's a lot has happened. Iran isn't just the only issue. We go through that and another interesting article regarding what has happened because of the war, what has happened because of the war in Ukraine and drone attacks on facilities in Russia. And what does that mean? Supply is highly concentrated in helium, and infrastructure is extremely limited. The system has very little redundancy, and every disruption leaves the market with less flexibility than before. If you look at, say, a few years ago, Russia's Amur gas processing project was expected to become one of the world's largest new helium suppliers. Then fires delayed the project. Now, this was before it was attacked, or helium processing facilities in Russia were destroyed. This was just simply there was a fire. Things happen. And that didn't move today's supply. So it damaged confidence in tomorrow's supply, though. Now, if we look now, fast forward to Qatar, and we look at future production, we're talking about helium that was already flowing through the global system. And then that becomes a very different problem, because taking out those facilities in the Middle East has meant roughly 30%, give or take, of that supply is gone. And assuming, which we don't have, peace tomorrow, you're looking at 5 to 10 years to rebuild that. That's a significant amount of helium while we're in an AI battle or race, while we're in a robotics race, when we're in a semiconductor and a chips race where you need helium. Okay, well, let's just go drill holes. Let's go find helium. Not that simple. So there's some structural fundamental issues that, once again, a little bit more boring. People don't, dig a little bit deeper. But that's what we're here for. We need to look to see a bit more depth to see what has been uncovered because of this. And right now, that ceasefire that happened weeks ago, it didn't start any discussions on instantly repairing any processing plant. It didn't create any liquefaction capacity. And certainly now that we're back on, everything's on hold. And we're left with, well, who's going to manufacture cryogenic containers or rebuild the inventories or set up new customers? Because guess what? Those contracts are broken. They're not receiving their helium. Long-term offtakes are obviously in upheaval and scrambling. Where do we get our supply next? So the war certainly didn't break the helium market, just as the fire in previous didn't break the helium market. It put a lot of undue pressure on it. And yes, there are majors that can supply helium to some degree, but not the quality, the high grade, and the ones that are necessary for different types of use. So often, it isn't just like the question, is there a helium shortage? There's going to be, just like copper. There's significant issues. The better question is, why does the helium market keep finding itself in this position? And you could ask that about any commodity. Why do we keep on coming back to we're at the beck and call of someone else that maybe not be the best partner, or that we're hoping if we have a partnership that with someone with extreme different beliefs, that will help strengthen ties and create diplomacy, because it can work. It's a good strategy for working, but you also leave yourself at a bit of a turning point if that tension becomes stronger, of which we're at. So when we look at the entire system and the market, they're not going to follow mispriced opportunities, especially in nuanced markets like uranium or helium, for very long. It just doesn't get the eyeballs. You can't sell that very well. It captures the people like myself, people that are really interested and really curious. And when they do come along on board and they see, holy smokes, this, don't take my word for it, this seems very legit. This seems to be happening. It doesn't take a lot of effort. Once we start kind of mentioning things, people just go, Qatari supply helium, Google, boom. They'll find out very quickly what's happening or what's occurring. And that's where we come in very handy, because once again, we're all about critical thinking and critical reasoning, never to take anyone's word for anything. But that someone could easily challenge me and say, okay, Andrew, I've read this report. Let me see if it's accurate. Go download it. Take a peek. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me if you think it's accurate. So if the problem isn't simply the war, and that is a problem, because we've talked about sulfur, once again, not being able to be sent out through the strait, and sulfur is needed for copper. We see China doing a complete clampdown on sulfur, and you need sulfur for fertilizer. These are integrated systems, and you start to kind of put it all together, that all of a sudden, wait a second, are you telling me that there's an issue with fertilizer? Yes. We've talked a little bit about that before. We talk about it a lot on our Substack. These are all linked together, and that's what makes this job fascinating too, because I'm a generally curious person. I'm very analytical, and you get to see how integrated all these things are and how fragile. It doesn't take much for one thing to cause a domino effect in another. And we're not dealing in times with a small domino affecting things. We're talking about massive, war. We're talking about plants being blown up, taken off the market. That isn't a tiny obstacle to overcome or a tiny challenge. That is a structural, significant issue. And unlike all things, obstacles, challenges, really awful news often have a silver lining in that they highlight a weakness that needs to be invested in and people need to focus on. And yeah, it takes a bit of oomph. It takes a lot of bravery to jump in and go, you know what? I like it. I'm gonna get positioned. It doesn't mean it's going to move tomorrow, but I'm going to start looking, because once again, I don't have to spend too much effort to confirm how much has been taken off, especially since Russian helium production has been last week attacked as well, on top of the 30% that's already been taken off. This is a situation rapidly not being paid enough attention to, but you're going to hear about it a lot soon. So let's assume that we have this diagnosis right, and that the war didn't, create the problem. It's exposed it. It's highlighted it. It's helped to remind me of the situation in helium. And we have to ask, probably got a better chance of understanding what happens in the market next. And here's what I think a lot of people, they're getting it wrong, is that they evaluate helium the same way that they would evaluate, any other commodity. gold or copper or even uranium, as we talked about, antimony. And they think, okay, listen, let's just go find the resource, build the mine, produce the commodity. Simple. Just go drill it, go find it. Well, helium doesn't quite work that way. And let's go back to first principles here. So if a major gold mine shuts down tomorrow, let's just take that. Would the world suddenly run out of gold? No, of course not. There's central bank vaults. They're buying continuously. There's ETFs. There's jewelry. There's tons of private holdings. If you follow Rick Rule or Sprott, I mean, they hold a lot of gold themselves, never mind that they have vaults. There's more than 200,000 roughly tons of gold already existing above ground. Now, the same idea applies to copper. Now, and copper has a demand and supply major issue as well. But if one large mine goes offline, fabricators don't immediately shut their factories. Warehouses, inventory, stockpiles. There's all sorts of places that they can come to a backstop. It doesn't last for long. It means there's urgency, but there is a backstop. It has a buffer. While prices adjust and new supply responds, that has an inventory that one can rely on. And I believe the rumors are true that China's been stockpiling for decades, not just for years, for decades. And they also, because they control a lot of the processing of a lot of these minerals and metals, that's a big issue. Now, with a commodity like helium, not quite the same. This isn't just a go dig a hole, find it, suck it up with a straw. This is a flow market. Now, that sounds like a bit of a nuance or a technical distinction, but it isn't. It's an entire investment thesis change, because a flow market doesn't just care about how much helium exists underground, and it doesn't necessarily care about, it matters, but it just, we've got high grade. It also cares about whether that helium can keep moving. That flow rate, just the same as in any kind of oil and gas extraction, the flow rate matters. So think about what happens to before a semiconductor manufacturer receives their helium. That helium has to be produced, separated from, often, not every time, from natural gas stream or specialty plants. It has to be purified. It has to be compressed. Sometimes it's liquefied, loaded into specialized cryogenic containers, transported, and then delivered. Every one of those steps has to work every day. There isn't some giant warehouse sitting with years of excess helium waiting for a crisis to occur. In fact, one of the most striking observations in our research was there is no meaningful strategic reserve capable of stabilizing the market if supply is interrupted. The US did have the Holbrook Basin at one point. Someone else has it now, but that is worth investigating as well. Are they going to come to terms and recognize, we had access to high-grade helium at one point in the Holbrook Basin? Is this something we should investigate further? Storage for this is expenses, and losses occur over time. Helium has a very sneaky, tricky way of exiting its container. It's very small. It's very tricky to handle. And that's extremely annoying for transportation, for everything else, which is why, like freezing it and transportation, it's not easy. So large-scale recycling, recycling remains unlimited. In other words, the system has very little slack when something goes wrong. And you could see with that kind of intricate system, a minor inconvenience can be annoying. It can cause a bit of an effort. But we've got major things happening, significantly major. And if helium prices double tomorrow, could the industry simply produce twice as much helium? A lot of people would say, well, yeah, just pump more. That's what, the go-to response would be. And a lot of people who aren't in any kind of extraction, and believe me, I've heard this like from interviews from CEOs at major car companies when they've made the assumption, say, on making lithium iron phosphate batteries. They just say, well, we're not worried about getting phosphate for our batteries because we can just go to Nutrien or we can just go to one of the major fertilizer companies. They've got tons of it. No, they don't have the grade that you require. It was an assumption made off of very, not a deep enough understanding that do you have enough of the specific high-grade lithium iron phosphate beneficiated phosphoric acid. That's very different. Now, once again, that's a nuance that's sounds a little bit technical and boring, but it's critical because it means no, you don't have access to it. And that happens here as well. You can't just all of a sudden, because you've got higher prices and you've got an issue, go, great, let's instantly build another separation plant tomorrow. Or let's just create another purification facility or Air Liquide saying, all right, great, let's manufacture liquefiers or produce more cryogenic tankers tomorrow. And that certainly doesn't qualify new customers. They're already in long-term contracts trying to sort that mess out right now, on top of trying to think of how do we get more access to helium for our contracts to fulfill those. Infrastructure takes years. Customer relationships take years, and some of these they're gone. And once again, it's no fault. I mean, you can't say you should have known these plants were going to get taken out or there would be an issue. That doesn't matter. When people want something and you've got a customer with a long-term offtake, they're not terribly understanding. So that trust is gone. People have very short lifespans, especially when a career may not be that long, to say, oh, it's okay, I understand you can't fulfill the contract. No, they're looking to see who can solve this for me right now at terms that I need because I've got customers. So when we looked at the entire report that we have, and once again, we're giving it away, give it a read. The limitation isn't just geological, because there are some interesting geological formations and companies out there. There is existing resources, but the limitation is the system. So let's think about that for a minute. We've spent a decade talking about scarce resources, and we, depending on what's getting the greatest headlines, we get noticed for it, or sometimes we don't. But the scarce asset isn't just helium. It's also the ability to reliably produce a lot of these things as well. Once again, if you're talking, of a metal, say lithium, and you're having to send it somewhere else, a rare earth, and you're saying, well, we're not going to process it here in North America either. We're going to find it in Nevada, we're going to find it in Arizona, and we're going to send it to China. Not ideal. Onshoring is happening. That takes time. And they're doing it for antimony. They're building plants, and they're building plants in different places in Canada as well. And this is good. But we need to be going about 10 times the speed if we actually want to try to meet any of the, even if you are into the climate argument narrative, you would need to have amount of processing and mines that would be incredible. You need amount of helium extraction that would be incredible. And it takes a long time for that crowd to get their head wrapped around why they need it, how come they need it, because their framework is very different, understanding of things. And all of that slows things down, because if people don't recognize and accept that something is needed, it gets met with permitting issues. It gets met with, federal issues or nonstop policy issues, but also just NGOs. And overall, if the people aren't behind something, they can shut down projects easily. So there's a very different framework here that we're considering here. And if we look at like an institutional investor, imagine if you had a $5 billion resource fund. I mean, that would be nice. That would be a nice world to have. And someone walks into your office and says, I found a helium discovery. Your first question probably isn't, unless you're really into the market, isn't, oh, what's the grade? What's the flow rate? The first question is, can you sell it? Can you produce it consistently? Do you have permits? Is the state okay? Do you have a processing plant? Can it separate? Can it get other noble gases? Like, can it get H3? What can it do? Can you actually deliver it? And then, of course, can it scale? Because a lot of times those, especially now, they're not buying just a discovery. And there are discoveries out there, which there's an opportunity there as well. They buy reliable helium supply. And this is also why flow rates matter more than just the headlines. You'll see many companies issue press releases highlighting 2% helium, 5% helium. We've seen 10% helium. And yes, is that interesting? Yes. But that doesn't generate revenue. the molecules do. A 10% reservoir with poor pressure and poor flow may be worth less than, say, 1% reservoir that produces exceptional volumes for years. So once again, very nuanced, slightly different than other markets. And that's why experienced operators, they obsess over flow testing, which is why when we're going to be looking at a number of dark horse companies out there that could make an impact. I mean, we're going to look at the big ones. I mean, the big energy companies, they produce helium. We're going to look at them to see how much they do and what their flow rates are. We're applying that flow rate model on top of the grade to really see who has the best shot at becoming possibly a strategic reserve. Or once the US government finally, just like they did with antimony, when they put it 2 and 2 together and go, wait, SpaceX needs helium? Yes. All of our semiconductors need helium? Yes. How many plants are we building and how many AI data centers? They're quickly going to come to terms with, do we have the helium? And say, I don't think we do. And there's going to be winners and losers. And that's the opportunity. And for us, it's identifying it sooner and being able to look at that extra step of who has data or who's going to give us data on pressure, permeability, decline curves, production testing, because the assays will create excitement. And once again, I can think of 2 companies with great assays. And the flow rates, though, that's going to create their actual business model moving forward. And that's what's going to be paying attention to, say, the likes of a federal government that has put hundreds of millions into antimony when they look and say, can you actually get this out of the ground? Can this be a business? Can we get this going? And when the capital markets recognizes a structural change like this, it rarely moves everywhere at once. It moves in layers. So if we first, it looks like companies already controlling that infrastructure, names like Lind, or like I mentioned before, Air Liquide and Air Products, they're already integrated into a system through processing, logistics, and customer relationships. The attention then shifts towards companies that might realistically add to that supply, not solve the shortage, but that's a distinction that matters. But can they participate in that response regionally and specifically, say for SpaceX or for Taiwanese semiconductor or XYZ data center? So that public universe becomes relatively small. So companies like Desert Mountain Energy, they've already demonstrated production processing infrastructure and commercial delivery through a much smaller scale than industrial gas majors, of course. The likes of Pulsar, Helium, they've reported encouraging concentrations and improving flow test results, but it remains in development stage and still requires additional infrastructure and capital before contributing any meaningful supply. And beyond that public market, private operators like North American Helium and Avante Helium are already producing or advancing projects with institutional backing, but they're largely inaccessible to retail investors. So, okay, are they going to help clear the problem? They're going to help, but not going to solve it. So let's be crystal clear. I'm not recommending any of those companies I just mentioned right now, but we're looking at them. And that's not the purpose of this discussion anyway. The purpose is to look to see who can fill that gap, because sooner or later, institutional money, federal money, grants, they're going to look, they're going to realize, and they're going to try to find teams, and they're going to look not just at what can come out of the ground, but what can come out of the ground fastest. Who has had to deal with permitting issues? Who hasn't at all? There's projects in places that haven't had to fight with the state yet, and they're going to. And even if there's federal pushback, some states are better than others. We've done research on this in the past. Some states have a federal override that if the federal government says this is critical, they step in and they override the state. That's also a critical distinction if we're looking at what we're looking at. Assuming you believe that the 30% is off because of Qatar, and you see what's happened in Russia and the helium situation. So once you stop asking and you start looking at the section, say who has helium, you go, well, who can reliably deliver? Who's advanced and how fast can they come to market? And this is how we're going to look at things. Is all of that macro on top of the flow rates and start positioning ourselves again here. So helium it's really looking less than an interesting commodity and more of a nuance, but it's really starting to look like a strategic infrastructure play. And we have to consider at what point do capital markets get into it. And we really look at this as not just the scarcity of the gas. We look at everything moves in stages, and we're really at that point where nobody cares. And right now it's tough. It's tough markets. There's bigger issues. People are worried about inflation. There's worried about a lot of issues. I'm not belittling. There's lots of issues that people are concerned about. But when specialists start paying attention and they start caring, and when customers starts to care that they're not getting their product, the government is going to start to care. And this is where we have an advantage, is we start looking to see we're ahead of that curve right now. The capital markets is going to wake up sooner or later. And then, of course, news flow will come out that'll be obvious. Well, of course, we've got a helium issue. It's going to happen. We saw that with rare earth. It's every once in a while you hear rare earths again. We saw it with antimony. We see it with uranium. It's the understanding that we're in an issue. We're in a race here. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at trying to solve strategic issues that are of critical importance. And that's our whole mission here. Whether you follow us on YouTube or you're new in Rumble, where we're really trying to reach out to our American friends to let them know of the opportunities with some of the companies that are really providing value in challenging markets. I mean, a lot of like OTC or junior markets, they're tough. That's a tough world to exist in. And we have a framework here that we rely on that's deeply analytical. And once again, partly because I come from a Merrill Lynch background, and I was curious enough to land in here and to take that level of analytical work and framework to a junior market that you don't necessarily see as much, and to put the macro with the micro together and go, we have a structural strategic situation here regarding all metals and mining, but also specifically with the things like sulfuric acid, which is happening right now, but also with helium, because we're early with helium. So make sure you reach out to me, Andrew, at themarketmindset.ca. Check out our Substack as well, The Market Mindset. And reach out to me. Send me an email. Tell me what you think. And once again, the Helium 5.0, I think we've got over 2,000 reads already. We just put it out the other day. Share it with people. Tell me what you think, and then challenge it. Take some of the thoughts and some of the ideas in there, throw it into ChatGPT or one of these large language models, or put it into Google and say, is this true? And let me know what you think, because we see an opportunity here. I can't tell you it's tomorrow. I can't tell you it's 3 months, 6 months, a year. That crystal ball I do not have. But what we do have here is solid fundamental understanding of markets, of logistics, of vertical integration, and of strategic need for gases, including other noble gases, especially H3, which is another layer of nuance when we're talking about helium. And we want you to become a part of that and to join in the story. If for nothing else, that you just love the curiosity of what goes into making engineering work, how markets work and how integrated they are. The story of helium is going to be very exciting in the near term, and we want you to come join us with, for that fun, for that ride. We're going to have lots of different takes, angles of the market and what's happening. And we're going to look at some companies as well, and we're going to do drill sheets on them. We're going to look at their flow rates, and we're going to weigh out some probabilities. I mean, there's going to be some controversy here, believe me, and there's going to be some feelings as well. And we're up for it. We're ready for it. And but we see it's too, in my eyes, it's too obvious a setup right now to not pay a lot of attention. And we are doing that. And we wanted to share that with everyone. And once again, we want to thank you for joining us. This is a bit longer today, but it's Canada Day. And we wanted to make sure to get this out to people. And so enjoy the rest of your day. And we look forward to any kind of engagement with you as well. Don't be shy. Send me off emails. I love getting them. Sometimes it's a little bit much, but if I can't answer them individually, we make sure to get on and do kind of a group email out or some sort of response on our Substack to say, hey, a lot of people asked about this. here we go. Because that's at the end of the day, we're trying to, I know people say this a lot, we're trying to build a community here of people that, even if they're not interested in stocks, they're interested in how things work. They're really curious. And they love to see this interplay of international politics, of finance, and how commodities, energy, and all this interplays and intertwines, and how interconnected the world is, and how that helps, but also how it hinders. And that's what makes the extraction industry so critical, but also so interesting, because there's all sorts of areas that we can discuss. And we try to leave the real, like the politics. Like I don't mean the obvious politics of permitting and policy, which are critical for markets, but we try to leave the other stuff out there because it's a lot of noise. We want people to really laser focus in and say, keep a lot of this distraction out. There's an opportunity here. Let's laser focus in, put our attention there, and leave the other stuff alone for now. It's going to sort itself out, whether or not I comment on someone else's video about something crazy. We have an opportunity in the midst of all the crazy to position ourselves. We're doing so, and we want you to come along for that ride. So everyone, once again, happy Canada Day. Enjoy yourself. And 4th of July is coming up, and we'll be reaching out to you guys as well to wish you all the best. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you real soon.